5:12 local time. Northern Arabian Sea. The water is dead calm, wind light, visibility perfect. USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced aircraft carrier ever built, moves through open ocean at 18 knots. From a distance, she looks almost motionless. A 100,000-ton island of American military technology cutting silently through deep blue water. On the flight deck, the morning cycle is beginning. Deck crews move between parked FA-18 Super Hornets, securing equipment and preparing the first patrol launch of the day. But below the deck, something is already wrong. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar wall glows with the quiet rhythm of a carrier strike group in motion. Green sweeps rotate across the screens. Dozens of contacts move across the digital map. Commercial shipping lanes, distant cargo vessels, fishing boats scattered across the horizon. Then a new contact appears, bearing 041, range 28 nautical miles. One of the radar operators leans closer to his console. New surface contact. A second blip appears behind it, then a third. 3 ships, tight formation. Their speed reads 16 knots, normal for naval patrol traffic, but their heading is what draws attention. All 3 vessels are moving directly toward the strike group. The system begins cross-referencing hull signature. Seconds later, the identification flashes across the screen. Iranian Navy. Inside the CIC, no one raises their voice. They don't need to. The officer of the watch marks the track. Surface group. 3 contacts, Iranian naval units, bearing steady. Up on the bridge, the information flows instantly through the ship's network. Outside, nothing changes. The sea is still calm. The carrier continues on its course. But inside the ship, every system is now watching those 3 contacts. At 5:14, the radar updates again. Speed increase. The Iranian ships accelerate from 16 knots to 21, then 24. The formation tightens. Instead of drifting apart, the 3 vessels move closer together, forming a shallow triangle. One of the CIC supervisors studies the screen. Course unchanged. That means they're still coming straight in. At 22 nautical miles, the strike group initiates standard maritime procedure. Radio hails. Iranian naval vessels approaching United States carrier strike group. This is U.S. Navy warship operating in international waters. Alter course immediately and maintain safe distance. The message echoes across the ocean. No reply. The Iranian ships continue forward. On the radar screen, their speed jumps again. 27 knots. That's no longer patrol speed, that's intercept speed. Inside the CIC, the watch team begins shifting posture without a single shouted order. Data streams expand across the displays. Long-range optics swivel toward the incoming vessel. Electronic warfare sensors begin logging emissions. At 516, the distance closes to 19 miles. Now the radar operators begin noticing something else. One of the Iranian ships has activated its surface search radar. The signal appears on the electronic warfare display, like a thin line of static. They're painting us. The phrase spreads quietly across the room. Painting means scanning, measuring range, speed, and heading, targeting information. Then the warning everyone was waiting for. Fire control radar detected. That changes everything. And search radar is observation. Fire control radar is targeting. The captain's voice comes across the command circuit, calm and controlled. Understood. At 519, the infrared sensors pick up 3 intense flashes of heat erupting from the decks of the Iranian warships. For half a second, the contacts are just bright signatures. Then the trajectories appear. 3 missiles, sea-skimming, heading directly for the strike group. The operator doesn't hesitate. Vampires inbound. And in that moment, the quiet calm of the Arabian Sea disappears, because somewhere beyond the horizon, 3 Iranian missiles are now racing toward the most powerful aircraft carrier on Earth. The carrier strike group has already seen them. High above the fleet, the E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft picks up the launch signatures seconds after ignition. Its radar beam sweeps hundreds of miles across the sea, feeding targeting data directly into the Aegis combat network protecting the fleet. Inside CIC, the intercept geometry begins calculating instantly. Time to impact, 90 seconds. The strike group's destroyer screen reacts before anyone on the carrier even sees the missiles. 8 miles ahead of the carrier, USS Arleigh Burke shifts from patrol posture to full defensive engagement. Deep inside her hull, the vertical launch system unlocks. Metal hatches slide open along the forward deck. The command is transmitted across the tactical network. Engage. 2SM-2. Standard missiles ignite in the launch cells. From the carrier's bridge, that sailors see twin pillars of flame erupt from the destroyer's bow as the interceptors leap into the sky. For a moment, they climb almost vertically, white contrails slicing into the early morning sky. Then the missiles roll and dive, guided by radar data shared across the strike group's network, racing toward the incoming targets. Inside CIC, the intercept countdown begins. SM-2 away. The first interceptor meets the Iranian missile 15,000 feet above the ocean. The explosion appears on radar as a sudden bloom of static. One track disappears, but two remain. Range now 8 miles. Impact in 40 seconds. The carrier's layered defense shifts to its next line. Another destroyer in the screen, USS Mason, locks its radar onto the two remaining missiles. ESSM ready. The evolved Sea Sparrow missiles are designed for exactly this moment. All fast, agile interceptors built to kill threats that slip past the outer defensive ring. Two more launch cells flare open. Twin interceptors streak away from the destroyer, leaving twisting trails of white vapor behind them. Inside CIC, the radar operator tracks the geometry. Intercept in 5, 4, 3. A flash blossoms across the radar scope. One more missile vanishes. Only one track remains. Range 4 miles. Time to impact 15 seconds. That final missile is flying just meters above the waves, its radar seeker locked onto the massive radar signature of the carrier. At that distance, even the destroyer's interceptors can't reach it in time. The last line of defense belongs to the carrier itself. On the forward deck of Gerald R. Ford, the Phalanx close-in weapon system comes alive. The white dome mounted above the carrier's superstructure swivels toward the incoming threat. Inside the mount, a 6-barrel 20mm Gatling gun spins up with a mechanical whine. Target lock. Range 1,500 yards. The system opens fire. The sound is unmistakable. A brutal metallic roar as thousands of rounds per minute rip into the morning air. From the flight deck, sailors watch a stream of tracer fire carve a glowing line across the sea. The missile enters the cloud of fire. For half a second, it continues forward, then it detonates. A violent burst of flame erupts barely 1,000 yards from the carrier's bow. Shattered fragments scatter across the water, splashing harmlessly into the sea. The final missile is gone. Inside the CIC, the radar operator exhales. He's all 3 targets neutralized, but the moment of relief lasts only seconds, because the radar picture updates again. The 3 Iranian warships are still closing, and this time, the infrared sensors detect something worse. Fresh heat blooms along their decks. The missile launch rails are opening again. The officer of the watch leans toward the screen. 3 new signatures ignite almost simultaneously. Another volley. 3 more missiles leap from the Iranian ships, their rocket motors burning bright as they climb briefly into the air, before dropping low toward the ocean's surface. The radar operator doesn't wait. Second wave inbound. Across the carrier strike group, alarms sound again. And this time, everyone understands something important. This isn't a warning shot. This is a fight. High above the fleet, B-2 FA-18. Super Hornets are circling in a combat air patrol pattern. They had launched minutes earlier for routine overwatch, but now their mission changes instantly. The lead pilot hears the call in his headset. Vampires inbound. Multiple. Vector 042. His radar screen lights up with 3 small returns racing toward the strike group, but something else appears behind them. A faint airborne contact. Higher altitude, slower speed. The weapons systems officer aboard the E-2D Hawkeye identifies it first. Iranian targeting drone. The small aircraft is flying several thousand feet above the missile flight path, acting as a relay. From that altitude, it can track the carrier's radar signature and transmit course corrections to the incoming missiles. Without it, the missiles are blind. In the Super Hornet cockpit, the pilot immediately adjusts course. Contact confirmed. He banks the jet hard to the right, dropping altitude as he accelerates toward the drone. Speed climbs past 500 knots. The pilot arms his weapon. AIM-120 selected. The drone continues its steady orbit above the missile track, completely unaware of the fighter closing in. The pilot squeezes the trigger. Fox 3. The AIM-12 OAMRAAM launches from the fighter's wing with a sharp flash of flame. The missile rockets forward, climbing rapidly toward the high-altitude target. Seconds pass, then the radar return disappears. The Iranian drone explodes into fragments high above the sea. Back in CIC, the tactical display updates instantly. The incoming missiles lose their mid-course guidance. Without the drone feeding them targeting corrections, their flight paths begin to drift. One missile veers several degrees off course. Another begins oscillating slightly above the waves, but they're still dangerous. Destroyers in the strike group fire again. 2 ESSM interceptors launch from USS Mason, racing toward the drifting target. The first Iranian missile is destroyed 6 miles from the carrier. The second disappears seconds later in a bright flash over the ocean. Only one remains. The wingman watches the remaining missile track. "I've got visual." He pushes the throttle forward. The jet surges ahead. Altitude drops to just 200 feet above the waves. He lines up behind the missile, closing the distance rapidly. The pilot steadies the aircraft, selects weapon. "Sidewinder." The AIM-9 X-tone chirps in his headset as the infrared seeker locks onto the missile's hot engine plume. But he fires. The Sidewinder leaps forward. 5 seconds later, it slams into the Iranian missile. The explosion erupts directly above the water, scattering fragments across the ocean's surface. All 3 missiles from the second volley are gone. Inside CIC, the radar picture clears again. But now the operators are watching something even more dangerous. The 3 Iranian warships are still closing. Distance, 13 miles. Speed, 31 knots. And their missile launch rails are still hot. The carrier strike group has successfully intercepted 2 full missile salvos. But the threat is far from over. High above the fleet, the 2 Super Hornets bank sharply and circle back toward the Iranian ships. From this altitude, the pilots can finally see them. 3 gray hulls cutting through the water at full speed. These smoke trails still drift upward from their missile launcher. Inside CIC, the captain's voice comes across the command network. "Enough." The defensive posture changes instantly, because up until now, the carrier strike group has been fighting to survive the attack. But now, the mission shifts. The order is clear. Neutralize the launch platform. The 2 FA-18 Super Hornets drop out of their holding pattern and descend toward the ocean. Altitude falls fast, 5,000 feet, 3,000, 1,000. Below them, the Arabian Sea stretches in every direction, calm and deceptively quiet. But ahead, 3 Iranian warships carve aggressive wakes across the water, still charging toward the carrier strike group at full speed. Inside the lead Super Hornet's cockpit, the targeting display stabilizes. 3 surface contacts. Range, 12 miles. The pilot tilts the aircraft slightly left, giving the radar a clear angle. The system paints the ships instantly. Each hull appears as a sharp geometric signature against the moving sea clutter. Behind him, his wingman confirms the same picture. 3 contacts locked. Back aboard USS Gerald R. The order travels across the strike group's encrypted network. Neutralize the launch platform. There is no hesitation. The Super Hornet's weapons panel lights up. AGM-84 Harpoon selected. The missile is built for exactly this moment. Sea skimming, radar guided, designed to destroy ships before they even see it coming. The lead pilot steadies the jet. Speed, 540 knots. Altitude, 300 feet. At that height, the aircraft is barely above the surface of the water. The ocean racing past beneath the canopy. The target range decreases rapidly. 9 miles, 8, 7. The radar locks onto the lead Iranian warship, the one that fired the first missile volley. The targeting box turns solid. The pilot presses the trigger. Fox! A Harpoon missile drops cleanly from the wing and ignites a split second later, its rocket motor blasting it forward over the sea. Immediately, the missile dives lower, just 20 feet above the water. Its radar seeker activates, locking onto the Iranian ship's massive metal hull. The Super Hornet banks sharply away the moment the missile clears the aircraft. Behind it, the wingman lines up his own shot. Second Harpoon away. 2 missiles now race across the water, invisible against the ocean's radar clutter. On the Iranian ships, the warning comes too late. The lead vessel's radar briefly detects the incoming threat, but at that altitude, the reaction window is seconds, not minutes. Crew members on deck turn toward the horizon. Then the first Harpoon arrives. The missile slams into the starboard side of the lead warship just above the waterline. The explosion tears through the hull with brutal force. A massive fireball erupts outward as the missile's warhead detonates inside the ship's internal compartment. Flames shoot high into the air. The vessel immediately lists to port, smoke pouring from shattered deck structures. But the attack isn't finished. 3 seconds later, the second harpoon strikes the second Iranian warship. The missile hits near the aft missile launch. The detonation ignites stored fuel and munition. The entire rear section of the ship disappears in a violent blast of fire and black smoke. The shock wave ripples across the sea. Inside the Super Hornet cockpit, the pilot glances briefly at the damage below. 2 ships burning, but the third Iranian vessel is still moving. Instead of stopping, it turns hard to port and attempts to accelerate away from the strike group. Speed climbs past 30 knots as the captain tries to escape the kill zone. Back inside the Combat Information Center aboard the carrier, the radar operators track the maneuver. Third vessel altering course, but escape isn't possible. High above the water, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter has already moved into position. Its sensors lock onto the fleeing ship. The helicopter's targeting system feeds precise coordinates directly into the strike group's network. Seconds later, another ship in the formation responds. From the forward deck of the guided missile destroyer, USS Mason, a launch cell bursts open. A single missile erupts upward in a tower of flame. For a moment, it climbs almost vertically before pitching forward toward the horizon. Guided by the Seahawk's targeting data, the missile races across the sea. The Iranian warship continues its desperate turn, engines roaring as the crew tries to outrun the incoming strike. But the missile closes the distance rapidly. Less than 30 seconds later, it arrives. The impact is catastrophic. The missile strikes the center of the ship, detonating deep inside the vessel's internal structure. A massive explosion bursts upward through the deck. Flames surge skyward as thick black smoke spreads across the ocean's surface. Within moments, the ship loses speed. Then it stops entirely. High above the battlefield, the 2 Super Hornets circle back toward the strike group. Below them, the scene is unmistakable. 3 Iranian warships, all disabled, 2 burning heavily, the third drifting dead in the water. The attack that began only minutes earlier has ended in complete silence, except for the sound of fires consuming what remains of the vessels. But inside the carrier strike group, no one celebrates. Because the mission is not victory, the mission is control. And the sea, once again, belongs to the fleet. 5:28 local time. The explosions fade quickly across the surface of the Arabian Sea. Smoke rises in 3 dark columns above the water, drifting slowly with the morning wind. From 10,000 feet above, the 2 FA-18 Super Hornets circle the area in wide arcs. The pilots scan the scene through their targeting pods. 3 vessels, all disabled. 1 drifting heavily to port, with flames pouring from the missile deck. Another broken near the stern. Its rear structure collapsed into a jagged mass of twisted metal. The third sits motionless, smoke rising through holes blasted into the center of the hull. Inside the cockpit of the lead fighter, the pilot transmits the update. 3 targets neutralized. Back aboard USS Gerald R. The message reaches the Combat Information Center within seconds. Radar operators confirm the same picture. All 3 hostile surface contacts have stopped moving. Speed, 0 knots, no new radar emissions, no missile signatures. The officer of the watch nods once. Threat eliminated. Across the carrier strike group, and the tension that has filled every compartment for the past 15 minutes begins to eat, but the fleet does not relax. Standard post-engagement procedures begin immediately. High above the strike group, the E-2D Hawkeye continues sweeping the horizon with its radar dome, searching for any additional aircraft or ships that might be approaching. None appear. Electronic warfare systems scan the spectrum for radar activity. Silence. No further Iranian signals. On the carrier's flight deck, another MH-60R Seahawk helicopter lifts into the air. Its rotors beat against the ocean wind as it moves toward the burning ships to document the aftermath. The helicopter crew activates their sensors. Infrared cameras record the fires consuming the damaged vessels. High-resolution optics zoom in on the shattered decks. Every image is time-stamped, as geolocated, and transmitted back to the strike group's intelligence systems. In modern naval warfare, evidence matters almost as much as firepower. Back on the carrier's bridge, the captain lowers his binoculars. Through the glass, he can barely see the distant smoke rising over the horizon. The engagement lasted less than 15 minutes. 6 missile salvos, 3 destroyed launch platform. The captain speaks calmly into the command circuit. Log the engagement. Inside the CIC, the action is recorded in precise detail. time of first missile launch, intercept sequences, Airwing strike authorization, final target neutralization, every second documented, every radar track stored. Because in a carrier strike group, nothing is ever left to memory. The Super Hornets make one final pass over the disabled ships before turning back toward the fleet. Their engines roar across the sky as they accelerate toward the carrier. Within minutes, the massive flight deck of USS Gerald R. appears beneath them like a floating runway stretching across the sea. One by one, the fighters trap the arresting cables and roll to a stop. Deck crews rush forward, guiding the jets into position. Engines power down. The pilots climb out, their helmets still tucked under their arms. No one cheers. There are no celebrations, just quiet professionalism. Because for the sailors aboard the strike group, this is not a story of victory. It is a reminder of something far more important. An aircraft carrier is never alone. The Gerald R. Ford may be the largest warship ever built, but it survives because of the network surrounding it. Destroyers armed with layered missile defenses, airborne radar watching hundreds of miles of sky, strike fighters capable of reaching targets far beyond the horizon, satellites and sensors feeding information into a single coordinated system. When those 3 Iranian warships fired their missiles, they were not attacking a single ship. They were confronting an entire fleet. And fleets respond. The Seahawk helicopter circles once more above the burning vessels before turning back toward the carrier. Behind it, the 3 damaged ships drift silently across the open water. The sea begins to swallow the smoke. And within the carrier strike group, operations continue exactly as they did before the missiles launch. Jets refuel. Radar scans the horizon. Sailors return to their station. Because out here, far from any coastline, the mission never really stops. The ocean may look calm, but every sailor in the strike group understands the truth. Out here, the next threat can appear at any moment, and when it does, the fleet will be ready.